I never liked Friday nights in that restaurant. Too many mirrors, too much laughter that felt borrowed. But this one was supposed to mean something. 45 years of marriage, my parents' milestone. Ethan tugged at my hand as the hostess led us through the maze of white tablecloths. Is Grandma gonna like my tie? He whispered. It was crooked, and he looked proud of it. She'll love it, I said, smiling, though my stomach was already tightening. The family table sat in the back, near the window where the city lights blurred into gold streaks. Rachel had claimed the seat at the head. Of course she had. Her laughter carried before we even reached them. Sharp, rehearsed, the kind of laugh that told everyone she belonged. "Emily," she said when she saw me, her tone half surprise, half superiority. "You made it." I kissed my mother's cheek, hugged my father, and nodded to Rachel's husband, Daniel. He gave a polite smile, tight, insincere. He'd always been careful with me, like someone avoiding a puddle. Ethan climbed into a chair beside me, chattering about school. The waiter approached with a practiced grin. "How many in your party tonight?" "8," Rachel said briskly. Then, looking at me, she added, "Actually, can we get another table? Just a small one off to the side." The waiter blinked. A separate table? Rachel gestured toward Ethan and me, all charm, no warmth. For them, since they're technically not family. The words hit the air like dropped silverware. For a second, no one breathed. My mother's fork froze midair. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. Daniel's smirk flickered and settled into the faintest grin. Ethan looked up at me, confusion swimming in his eyes. "Mom?" I reached for his hand under the table, squeezing it once. My voice came out steady. "It's fine, sweetheart. We'll sit wherever there's room." The waiter hesitated, then looked at me, waiting for a cue. I shook my head. "We'll stay." Rachel laughed lightly, that brittle, hostess laugh she used when she wanted control back. "Oh, come on, Em, I was kidding." But she wasn't. Everyone knew she wasn't. Dinner went on, pretending to be normal. The candles flickered. The clink of glasses filled the silence where real conversation should have lived. My father made a toast, something about family, perseverance, love. The word love tasted sour in the air. Rachel interrupted often, updating everyone about her kids' new private school and their ski trip in Aspen. My mother nodded along, proud and obedient. I sat quietly, slicing through my salmon like it owed me answers. Daniel caught my eye once. There was a flicker of something. Pity? Amusement? It was gone before I could name it. When dessert arrived, Ethan whispered, "Can we go home, Mom?" His voice was small, tired. I nodded. "Yes, baby, let's go." Rachel noticed. "Leaving already?" she asked, eyebrows arched. "We haven't even done the family photo." I forced a smile. "You have a lovely camera. I'm sure it'll capture all the love you need." I stood, signaled the waiter, and handed him my card before anyone could protest. "This one's on me." He blinked. "The whole table, ma'am?" "Yes," I said, "every chair." Rachel looked annoyed. "That's not necessary." "No," I said softly, slipping my coat over my shoulders. But apparently, neither am I. Her face flushed crimson, but she said nothing. My parents avoided my eyes. Daniel's smirk was gone, replaced by the silence of someone who knew something was ending. Ethan and I walked through the restaurant's glass doors, into the cool night. The air smelled like rain and relief. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding since childhood. In the parking lot, Ethan leaned his head against my arm. Did we do something wrong? I crouched beside him, smoothing his hair back. "No, sweetheart. Sometimes people forget how to be kind, but that's on them, not us." He nodded, trusting me completely, the way children do before the world teaches them otherwise. At home, after I tucked him into bed, I sat by the window with a cup of tea that had long gone cold. The city lights blurred again, same as in the restaurant window, but this time they didn't make me feel small. I replayed Rachel's words over and over, technically not family. Strange how something you've always known still manages to wound you when spoken aloud. I thought about all the times I'd paid their bills, covered their emergencies, sent gifts from the whole family. I thought about the late nights I'd stayed awake balancing their comfort against my own. And for what? A chair at a table that was never really mine. The clock ticked past midnight. I set down the empty cup and looked at my reflection in the dark glass. "That's it," I whispered. I'm done earning love that isn't for sale. I turned off the lights and went to bed. But sleep didn't come easily. Somewhere between exhaustion and anger, I made a silent vow. That night, I promised myself I'd never sit at a table where love had to be proven. By the next morning, Daniel called me, and the word he used changed everything. I woke up that morning still feeling the echo of last night's humiliation. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand, a string of unread messages from coworkers, a few polite ones from acquaintances who'd seen the family dinner photos Rachel had proudly posted online. Everyone smiling, glasses raised, everyone except me and Ethan, cropped out neatly by the camera frame. I made coffee, the kind that bites a little, and tried to drown the sting. I had work to catch up on. My consulting firm had just finalized an investment deal, a quiet acquisition that had kept me awake for nights. Hartwell Holdings, a strategic expansion I'd helped orchestrate for months. Numbers, negotiations, sleepless due diligence, it was all finally done. The irony didn't hit me until 9:14 a.m. My phone rang. Unknown number. Corporate ID flashing, Langford and Associates. Daniel's firm. My stomach tightened, but I answered anyway. "Good morning," I said evenly. A male voice replied, sharp and confident. "This is Daniel Langford, VP of Client Relations. I'm calling to coordinate your onboarding meeting with our new partners at Hartwell Holdings." For a heartbeat, I said nothing. The universe paused, almost amused. "Oh," I said quietly, "that won't be necessary, Daniel." He chuckled. "Oh, are you not with the consulting team anymore?" I took a slow sip of coffee. "Not exactly. Hartwell Holdings is my team now." Silence. A stunned, awkward, beautiful silence. I'm sorry," he stammered. "Did you say your team?" "Yes," I said calmly. "We closed the acquisition last week. As of this morning, Langford and Associates is now part of Hartwell Holdings. I'm the majority shareholder." The silence deepened. I imagined his face, the subtle smirk he'd worn last night at dinner, the glint of superiority fading as the tables turned. "Wait, Emily?" he finally said, his voice cracking in disbelief. "You're my new boss?" I almost laughed. Almost. "Yes, Daniel," I replied, my tone crisp, professional. "Let's keep it professional." He cleared his throat, scrambling to regain composure. "Of course. I'll arrange the executive transition documents immediately. Welcome aboard." "Thank you," I said. "And Daniel?" "Yes? Next time you see your wife, tell her she was right. I did find another table." He exhaled sharply. "Emily," but I hung up. For a few seconds, I just sat there, listening to the faint hum of my coffee machine, feeling the irony seep through every corner of the room. The universe really did have an odd sense of timing. All the years of being treated like a shadow, the adopted one, the convenient outsider who was good enough to fix things but never good enough to belong, had somehow led me here, to this, a boardroom bigger than any dinner table Rachel could ever command. I closed my laptop slowly and whispered to myself, "Let's see how this meal tastes when I'm serving." I hung up and realized Rachel's husband now worked for me. I was 16 when I found out I was adopted. Not through a heartfelt confession, not even a misplaced word, but through a stack of papers buried in the wrong drawer. It was summer. I'd been searching for my birth certificate so I could apply for a part-time job at the library. My mother was in the garden pruning roses, and my father was watching one of his endless history documentaries. I remember the dust motes floating in the sunlight, and how one of the folders slipped open as I pulled it from the cabinet. Inside was a manila envelope stamped with "Confidential, Adoption Records." My name was on it, Emily Grace Reynolds. Beneath it, another, "Born to unknown mother, age 19. The words blurred for a second, like they were refusing to settle into meaning. I remember sitting on the floor, reading and rereading that line until the air felt too thick to breathe. When I finally confronted my parents, my mother cried, my father stared at the television. Neither denied it. They said they hadn't told me because it didn't matter, because I was theirs in every way that counted. But something cracked that day, a quiet fissure that never really closed. Rachel was 18 then, already sharp-tongued and impossibly certain of her place in the world. When she found out I knew, she leaned against my bedroom door and smirked. "So the charity project finally knows," she said. "Guess that makes things easier for everyone." She left before I could respond. After that, I stopped asking questions. I learned to nod when I was spoken to clean my plate, to be grateful. I learned that love in that house was conditional, a reward for silence and service. Through college, I sent money home. When Dad's back injury forced him to retire early, I covered the mortgage. When Mom needed surgery, I wired the hospital directly. I told myself that if I kept giving, maybe I could buy my way into belonging. But no matter how much I sent, no matter how many bills I paid, Rachel still introduced me as my sister. Well, technically. It's strange, the lengths we go to for a family that never wanted us. How we keep showing up to dinners where our chairs are optional. How we keep forgiving people who never even ask for it. That night after the restaurant, those memories came rushing back like an old storm. The papers, the smirk, the way my mother once whispered, "You're special, Emily," with a guilt that sounded like pity. I realized I'd spent my life chasing a version of love that had been written on forged documents. They needed my money, but not my name. The years after college blurred into one long act of service. While Rachel climbed social ladders and perfected her charm, I was always the reliable one, the sister who could be counted on to help out. When Rachel's twin daughters got into private school, she called me in tears about the tuition. "It's just until Daniel's bonus clears," she'd said. I transferred the money that same night. The bonus never came. The repayment never did either. When my parents wanted to celebrate their 40th anniversary with a cruise, Rachel suggested, "Maybe you could cover the flights. You're good with finances." So I did. They sent me a postcard from the ship, signed Love, Mom, Dad, and Rachel. My name was missing, again. Every act of giving became another quiet wound I didn't talk about. I told myself I was being good, dutiful, grateful, but beneath it all, I was just trying to keep my place at a table that had always felt borrowed. After my divorce, the silence got heavier. Ethan was only 7 then, sweet, quiet, with his father's eyes and my stubborn heart. That Thanksgiving, I decided to host dinner at my house for the first time. I cleaned for days, bought the good plates, roasted 2 turkeys because Mom had once said Rachel liked white meat only. Ethan helped me set the table. 12 seats, polished silverware, cloth napkins folded like little boats. He even drew tiny name cards, writing Grandma, Grandpa, Aunt Rachel, Uncle Daniel in his best crayon handwriting. 5 o'clock came, then 6, then 7. No one arrived. At 7:43 p.m., my phone buzzed with a single message from Rachel. "Sorry, Em, last-minute dinner at Daniel's boss's place. You understand." I stared at the empty table for a long time. The food grew cold, the candles dripped down to stubs, and Ethan finally asked, "Mom, are they lost?" I smiled, pretending it didn't hurt. "No, sweetheart. They just had other plans." Later, after I'd tucked him in, I sat alone in that dining room. 12 perfect plates, untouched, and took a photo. A record of my loyalty, lined with silence. That picture still sits in my phone. Every now and then, I look at it when I need to remind myself how blindness can look like kindness. I had spent years feeding a family that starved me of love. I hadn't heard from Margaret Snow in almost 3 years, not since she retired from the bank and moved to a quieter town by the coast. She was the kind of woman who made silence feel like authority. White hair always pinned tight, voice calm, eyes sharper than most lawyers I'd met. So when her name flashed on my phone that morning, I felt both warmth and warning. "Emily Hartwell," she said, using my professional name, the one few people in my family even knew. "You've been busy." I smiled into the receiver. "You always kept tabs on me, didn't you?" "I keep tabs on the people worth watching," she replied. "Congratulations on the Hartwell acquisition. I knew the girl who stayed late balancing other people's ledgers would own a few one day." Her tone softened, but only for a moment. "Though, dear, I also read that Daniel Grant is one of the managing directors under Hartwell's new corporate umbrella." I hesitated. "He is." Margaret clicked her tongue softly. Then I imagine dinner conversations just became very interesting. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was easier than explaining the irony of Rachel's husband working under me without knowing it. Margaret, of course, didn't need me to say it. She could read silence like a spreadsheet. "They don't deserve to sit on your kindness anymore, dear," she said finally. "You've paid your dues 100 times over. Maybe it's time to collect." There was something in her tone, a careful edge that meant she'd been reading more than the morning news. "What do you know, Margaret?" She exhaled slowly. "Enough to be concerned. Let's just say Daniel's company hasn't been entirely forthright. Before the merger, there were whispers about falsified client reports and suspicious expense transfers. It's not conclusive, but some of those expenses trace directly to personal accounts, one of which, I regret to say, has your sister's name attached." My stomach tightened. "Rachel? I don't like gossip," Margaret continued, "but numbers don't lie. I'm sending you a file. You'll understand when you see it." A soft chime hit my inbox moments later. One attachment, encrypted, password, apple pie, an inside joke from my first week at the bank when I spilled pie on a client's suit and she told me, "Even mistakes can feed you if you learn from them." I opened the file. Rows of figures, columns labeled client retainer reimbursements, consulting fees, executive perks, and then a digital signature, clean and bold at the bottom of a falsified report, Rachel M. Grant. My breath caught. It wasn't just Rachel living off Daniel's income. She was part of the siphon, using fake consulting invoices under her name, feeding money into accounts that weren't supposed to exist. Margaret's voice came softly through the phone. "You always told me family meant loyalty. Maybe it's time to find out what theirs means." I stared at the glowing screen, my pulse steady but cold. The same sister who once mocked me for being technically not family had been funding her designer life through someone else's deceit, and her signature was the proof. Margaret didn't need to say more. "Emily," she murmured, "some debts can only be paid by truth." When the call ended, I just sat there, the file open before me, my hands trembling, not from anger, but from clarity. For years, I'd given my family money out of guilt. Now, I had proof that guilt was their favorite currency. Margaret sent me one file, and my sister's signature was right there. The file sat open on my laptop long after Margaret hung up. Rows of numbers stared back like silent witnesses. Transactions dated years ago, back when I was still clawing my way through the wreckage of my divorce. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Transfers under my own company name, E. Hartwell Consulting, but the recipient account was one I'd never recognized. I enlarged the PDF, my heart thudding as I followed the trail. A dozen payments marked subcontractor reimbursements, each between $5,000 and $20,000, all approved by one name, Rachel M. Grant, authorized accountant. I blinked at it, remembering the time she'd offered to handle my books for a while. I was too busy rebuilding my life, juggling Ethan's school runs and new clients, and Rachel had insisted she'd help. "You need to rest, Em," she'd said. "Let me manage the boring stuff." I thought she was being kind. Now I realized she was managing the theft. I called Margaret immediately. Why didn't I see this before? My voice cracked, half fury, half disbelief. Her answer came steady and kind. "Because love makes us blind, Emily, but paper never lies." I sank into my chair, staring at the invoices. Every one of them carried my company's letterhead. My digital signature had been copied from an old tax file, pixel-perfect forgery. Rachel hadn't even needed to hack me. She'd had access through my old shared drive. Margaret's tone softened. "You need to bring in someone who knows the system inside out, quietly. Don't confront her yet. Who do you suggest?" "I'll connect you with a forensic accountant and a lawyer I trust. Start with them. No social posts, no messages. Let the numbers do the talking." That night, after Ethan was asleep, I printed the reports and spread them across the dining table. the same table where, months earlier, I'd eaten Thanksgiving alone. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd once set it with plates for a family who never showed up, and now it was covered in evidence of how thoroughly they'd eaten from me anyway. The lawyer Margaret recommended, James Cullen, a quiet man with the patience of a priest, called the next morning. "I've reviewed the file," he said after a long pause. "This isn't just mismanagement, it's embezzlement. And because the documents use your business ID, she technically committed identity fraud too." The words hit like a physical blow. Identity fraud. My own sister. James continued, "If you wish to pursue this, we'll start with a private audit. No police yet. We'll gather every transfer linked to your name. You'll need bank statements, past client receipts, anything you can recover." "I have backups," I said numbly. "Rachel helped me organize them after the divorce." "Then she may have left traces. Thieves rarely erase their footprints completely." After the call, I opened my old cloud storage. Years of archived files, contracts, invoices, scanned checks. I searched by Rachel's initials and froze. There they were, 2 Excel sheets labeled RMG Budget_Review 2017 and Expense_Allocation Private, hidden under a subfolder titled Personal Notes. I clicked. Inside were meticulous logs, Rachel's logs, listing where every dollar went. Designer stores, resort payments, private school tuition for her twins, all under headings like consultant bonus and operational write-off. I leaned back, my chest tightening. Every gift she'd flaunted, every success she'd thrown in my face had been funded by my own labor, my own faith. I could almost hear her voice from that night at the restaurant. "You're technically not family." Maybe not, but I'd been the family's bank, their foundation, their easy forgiveness. Margaret's words echoed again. Paper never lies. So I started printing. Every document, every transaction, every email where Rachel's name appeared beside mine, I filed them neatly in a black folder labeled Truth. By midnight, the stack was over an inch thick. I looked at it and whispered, "This time, I'm not cleaning up their mess. I'm exposing it." I shut off the lamp, leaving only the faint blue glow of my computer screen over the papers. Quiet, damning proof of betrayal. The more I dug, the clearer it became. Rachel's luxury came from my labor. The attic smelled the same as it had when I was a child, like dust, cedar, and a faint trace of mothballs that never seemed to fade. The single bulb overhead flickered as I pulled the string, scattering light across boxes labeled in my mother's neat cursive. Christmas, Rachel's college, Emily's school years. I told them I was stopping by to collect old family photos for Ethan's school project. It wasn't entirely a lie, but I wasn't there for nostalgia. I was there for proof. Margaret and James had both advised me to check any old records still stored under my parents' roof. If Rachel handled your finances once, James had said, she might have done the same with family documents. Hidden history has a way of leaving paper trails. So there I was, kneeling on the creaking wooden floor, hands blackened with dust, opening boxes like tombs. The first few held nothing but report cards, yellowing greeting cards, and an old stuffed bear with one eye missing. But the third box, the one labeled Legal Papers, 1989, made my heart stumble. Inside was a manila folder sealed with tape, the ink faded but still legible, Adoption, E. Reynolds. I hadn't seen it since I was 16. The seal tore easily. Inside were typewritten documents, formal letters from a law firm, signatures from my adoptive parents, and, near the bottom, a folded draft stamped confidential, not filed. It was a will, unsigned but unmistakably legal. Last will and testament of Anne Waverly. The name stopped me cold. I'd seen it once before, a faint signature on the corner of my adoption certificate, my biological mother. My throat tightened as I began to read. The document named me as the sole beneficiary of a trust fund, established through Waverly Holdings, a modest but stable estate, left for the care and future independence of Emily Waverly. But at the bottom, the notes told a different story. Pending adoption, to be held in trust until age 21,
to be released upon disclosure to beneficiary. Disclosure that never came. There were no bank statements, no follow-up letters, just a single memo, paper-clipped to the back. Family has declined to pursue claim. Case closed, August 1999. My adoptive parents' signatures sat neatly below. I pressed my hand to my chest. They hadn't just hidden the truth of my birth, they'd hidden an inheritance meant for me. And suddenly, small details from the past rushed back like echoes. My father's unease when college tuition was discussed, my mother's quickness to change subjects whenever I asked about birth records, and Rachel, always Rachel, intercepting the mail with a too sweet smile. I dug deeper in the box, searching for anything more. At the very bottom, between stacks of old bills, I found an unsealed envelope addressed to Miss Emily Waverly, Reynolds, never sent. The postmark was 25 years old. Inside was a letter, short, typed, formal, but devastatingly clear. Dear Miss Waverly, following your biological mother's passing, the trustee has been instructed to transfer the residual assets to your name upon proof of identification. Please contact our office to arrange release of funds. The letter had never reached me. Someone had opened it and left it here, buried under decades of silence. I didn't need to guess who. Rachel had lived at home longer than I had, taken charge of sorting the family mail when Dad's eyesight began failing. She'd always been the first to help open anything official. I sat back on my heels, the paper trembling in my hands. The truth settled like dust in the air around me. The adoption wasn't the shame. It was the secret fortune behind it.
The silence, the favoritism, the patronizing tone, it all made sense now. Rachel had known there was money tied to my name. Maybe my parents thought they were protecting me, but Rachel, she'd turned it into leverage. I folded the letter carefully and slipped it into my bag. Below me, I could hear my mother calling up the stairs. "Find what you need, sweetheart?" I swallowed. "Just some old memories," I said softly. When I turned off the attic light, the bulb flickered one last time, like it was winking at the truth that had finally come to light. The adoption wasn't the shame, it was the secret fortune behind it. For weeks, I said nothing. I just moved. The morning after I found the will, I called my lawyer. I didn't even have to explain everything. She'd heard my tone before. The one that came after years of quiet endurance finally curdled into resolve. Within 48 hours, Rachel's name was removed from every shared account. I filed a legal claim to reclaim the trust fund my birth mother had intended for me, the one my family buried decades ago like a sin. It felt strange. Power didn't roar, it whispered. I didn't need to slam doors or shout across dining tables. I just signed my name, the same name they once mocked, and let the system correct the lies. Margaret called every evening to check in. "Remember," she said, "you're not taking revenge, you're restoring balance." I wanted to believe her. By the end of the week, Rachel's lifestyle began to crumble. Her credit card was declined at the boutique she bragged about online. The private school that educated her kids on Aunt Emily's generosity sent her an overdue notice. Her calls started flooding in, cheerful at first, then strained, then desperate. "Hey, Em, must be a glitch of the bank system, right? You'll fix it? Em, Mom's asking what's going on. Please call me. Emily, this is insane. You're ruining us." I didn't answer. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, the same spot where I'd once written her tuition checks and birthday cards for her children. The irony wasn't lost on me. She had called me family only when she needed funding. Meanwhile, Daniel, her husband, my brother-in-law, was facing humiliation of his own. The acquisition Margaret mentioned had gone public. With me as the majority shareholder's consultant, I now had control over one of his company's key divisions. The same man who once rolled his eyes when I spoke at family dinners now waited nervously for my signature on his budget approvals. He showed up at my office unannounced one afternoon, wearing his best attempt at humility. "Emily," he started, closing the door behind him, "you've made your point. Rachel's scared. You're hurting the family." I met his gaze evenly. "You mean the family that told me to find another table?" He flinched. He tried to laugh it off, to reach for the charm he used to sway board members and dinner guests alike. But charm only works on those who still care.
"You've got to let this go," he said softly. "You're better than this." I leaned forward, my voice calm, almost gentle. "No, Daniel, I'm exactly this. I'm just finally letting myself be seen." When he left, I watched him from the window. The same man who once called me the helper to his friends, now walking with his shoulders tight, his world quietly shrinking. I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. That night, I logged into my financial dashboard and stared at the numbers, the trust fund, the reclaimed accounts, the company shares. For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of being enough. Rachel kept calling. Her voice messages turned to accusations. "You're tearing this family apart. You think money makes you better than us? You're punishing us for loving you." Loving me. The phrase twisted like a knife, because that was their version of love. Conditional, transactional, always demanding proof. I didn't respond. Instead, I sent one final message to her inbox. Short, simple, surgical. "You asked me to find another table? I did, and it's a lot bigger than yours." After that, silence. The quiet wasn't empty this time. It was clean. I made dinner for myself that night. Salmon, lemon, roasted potatoes, and ate alone, candlelit, the way I used to dream my holidays might look. For years, I had built my life around feeding others, emotionally, financially, spiritually, always hoping they'd finally offer me a seat at the table. But now, I realized I'd never needed their invitation. I'd built my own table. I'd just forgotten to sit down. Margaret called again before bed. "How do you feel?" she asked. I thought for a long moment. "Like I'm finally in the right story." She chuckled softly. "Good, because stories like yours, they don't end with silence. They end with recognition. Recognition."
By Christmas, the trust would be legally mine. The assets transferred, the board seats reassigned, every last document stamped with the name they once treated like a stain. And by then, the entire family would know whose name was really on the deed. By Christmas, the entire family would know whose name was really on the deed. It started with a phone call I didn't want to answer. "Emily?" My mother's voice was trembling, half fear, half irritation. "Your sister is falling apart. The kids are scared. Can't you just fix this quietly?" Quietly, that word again. The family's favorite solution. Bury it, polish the surface, pretend nothing ever happened. "I can't fix something I didn't break," I said softly. "You're being cruel," she whispered. "She's your sister." "She was my thief," I replied, and hung up before my voice could shake. Within days, the whispers turned to chaos. Rachel called everyone, mutual friends, old neighbors, even our pastor, spinning her story like silk around a spider's web. She told them I'd lost my mind after the divorce, that I was vengeful, obsessed with ruining her marriage and stealing back what was never mine. She forgot that the truth has a way of leaking, especially when the people you lie about can read. Daniel, under pressure from his company and desperate to save his position, started leaking internal documents to the investigators. The emails, the forged signatures, the diverted transfers, all of it traced back to Rachel. I didn't even have to lift a finger. When Margaret called, she sounded calm, almost amused. "Let the truth walk into the room on its own," she said. "You just open the door." That line stuck with me, because for years I had done the opposite, shutting doors to protect everyone else, protecting their image, their comfort, their lies. But now I was done. Rachel's panic became public. She posted long, self-pitying paragraphs online about betrayal, family greed, forgiveness. People commented sympathy emojis, unaware of the documents circulating quietly in corporate inboxes. Meanwhile, my parents switched from pleading to blaming. Dad left me a voicemail that sounded more like a sermon than concern. "You're shaming this family, Emily. What would your mother think if she were alive?" My mother was alive. She just refused to speak when truth got uncomfortable. The next day, I found her outside my building, small, pale, wrapped in her old mink coat like armor. "Rachel made mistakes," she said, her voice thin. "But you airing this out, it's destroying us."
I looked at her for a long time. You destroyed me when you hid who I was. Her lips parted, but no words came. She just turned and left, the smell of her perfume lingering like memory. After she left, I sat by the window, watching rain streak across the glass. My reflection stared back, tired, older, but steady. For the first time, I didn't see the quiet, obedient daughter or the forgiving sister. I saw someone who had finally stopped apologizing for surviving. That night, I called Margaret again. "You were right," I said. "The truth's walking into the room." She chuckled. "Good. Now, pick the right room." I smiled faintly. I already have. Because there was one day when the entire family gathered no matter what, our father's birthday. The perfect stage for secrets to breathe. I imagined it already. The old dining room, walls lined with framed photos, the perfect, smiling portraits of our loving family. But behind every smile was a silence that had cost me half my life. This time, the cracks in that portrait would finally show. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need revenge speeches or slammed doors. All I had to do was show up, calm, composed, and armed with the truth. As I turned off the light and headed to bed, I felt something new. Not peace exactly, but purpose. Because this wasn't about payback anymore. It was about finally telling my story in the one room where I'd always been told to stay quiet. So I did, and I chose the room myself, our father's birthday party. The restaurant was the same one from that night, the one with the amber lights and linen-draped tables where laughter used to echo like something borrowed. 45 years of marriage had turned into 46, and my father was celebrating another year of what he called a blessed life. Rachel had reserved the private dining room again, the same polished oak table where she'd once told me to find another seat. Only this time, I didn't need one offered. I walked in dressed in ivory, calm, deliberate, untouchable. The color of beginnings, not endings. Daniel looked up first, his smile hesitant, guilt pulling at the corners of his mouth. My mother's eyes flickered between me and Rachel, already sensing something underneath the gloss.
"Emily!" Rachel sang out, her voice too bright, too controlled. "You came! How wonderful!" She kissed the air beside my cheek, her perfume sugary and sharp. "Wouldn't miss it," I said softly. The evening unfolded like a performance, Rachel telling stories too loud, Dad laughing at all the right moments, Mom nodding like a metronome. I sat still, watching, remembering how small I used to make myself in this very chair. When dessert was cleared, Rachel clinked her glass. "Before we get to gifts," she said, "I think it's only fair my sister gets a chance to say a few words. After all, she's had quite the year." I smiled, rising slowly. "Thank you, Rachel. I do, actually." All eyes turned toward me. The room quieted, even the waiters pausing in the doorway. I looked at my father first. "Dad," I began, "you've given your life to building a family, a name, a home, a legacy. Tonight, I want to return something that was lost." From my bag, I pulled a flat, wrapped frame and placed it in front of him. Inside was the deed to our family home, the one my parents had almost lost years ago before I paid off the mortgage in secret. Only now, the title bore a new heading, Hartwell Family Trust, with my name listed as trustee. "I've restructured the assets," I explained gently. "Everything is secure now, legally, financially, no more hidden accounts, no more confusion." Rachel's smile cracked. "Excuse me? What assets?" "The ones that were misused," I said evenly, turning to her. "The ones taken under my name, redirected into your personal accounts. The funds you moved through Daniel's firm using my old credentials." She laughed, brittle, forced. "Emily, that's absurd. You're mistaken." I reached into my folder and slid the papers across the table. Signed transactions, mirrored accounts, her forged signature beside mine. Margaret had made sure every detail was certified, time-stamped, undeniable. "This isn't a mistake," I said quietly. "It's history." Daniel's head dropped, his hands trembling around his wineglass. "She's not lying," he murmured. Rachel, they traced everything. The air thinned. My father's fork clattered against his plate. My mother whispered something under her breath. A prayer, maybe? Rachel's face went pale, her lips parting, but no sound coming out. The performance was over. The audience had seen too much. "You ruined me," she hissed suddenly, standing so fast her chair toppled back. "You always wanted this, to humiliate me." I didn't move. "No, Rachel, I wanted family. You wanted ownership." Around us, the guests shifted uncomfortably. Phones were raised discreetly, recording, whispers turning into digital witnesses. And in that instant, Rachel realized it. Her gaze darted to the cameras, then to Daniel, who wouldn't meet her eyes. The color drained from her face, leaving only shock and silence. My voice stayed calm. "You told me once to find another table," I said, so I did, and I built one where truth has a seat. Then I placed the folder back in my bag, gave my father a small nod, and walked out, the sound of whispers following me down the hall like a tide receding. Outside, the night air felt lighter than it had in years. Rachel's face drained of color. She realized every guest was recording. The fallout came faster than anyone expected. Within a week, the glossy portrait of our perfect family had cracked wide open. News of the internal fraud reached the boardrooms first, then the local press, then, inevitably, the dinner tables of everyone who had ever envied Rachel's life. Rachel's name vanished from the company website overnight. Daniel's resignation followed within days. The last time I saw her, she was sitting in a lawyer's office, mascara smudged, defiance drained. She didn't even look up when I entered. "I'm not here to destroy you," I said softly, setting a stack of documents on the table. "But I can't ignore what you did." Her lawyer shifted in his seat. "Your sister is willing to negotiate." "I'm not here to negotiate," I interrupted. "I'm here to end it." The silence that followed was heavy, like closing a book you'd pretended to enjoy. I slid the papers toward them. "These are the restitution agreements, the accounts you used in my name, the false transfers, the trust funds. You'll sign everything back over. Once it's done, I'll withdraw all civil action." Rachel finally looked up, her voice small. "Why are you doing this? After everything?" "Because revenge doesn't build anything," I said. "It just burns what's already broken." She didn't answer. Her hand trembled as she signed her name, stroke by stroke, across the lines that once tied us together. When it was done, I gathered the documents and stood. "Goodbye, Rachel." She didn't try to stop me. That evening, I went to see my parents. The house looked smaller now, its walls thinner somehow, as if time itself had taken sides. Mom opened the door, eyes red. Dad sat in his recliner, silent, hands folded tight. "We know," Mom began before I spoke, "about the trust, the inheritance. We thought keeping it from you would keep everyone together." "By lying?" I asked quietly. Dad's eyes finally met mine. "We were wrong," he said simply. "You didn't deserve that." I nodded. "I don't need an apology. I just need honesty." From my bag, I pulled the final set of papers. "Sign these. Transfer what's left of the assets that belong under my name. It's not about the money. It's about truth on record." Mom hesitated, tears spilling. "Emily, are you punishing us?" "No," I said gently. "I'm just setting the table right." They both signed, slowly, like people laying flowers on something they'd buried long ago. When I walked out of that house, the air felt different, clean, light, unburdened. I didn't feel victorious, just free. Ethan was waiting in the car, sketchbook open on his lap. "How did it go, Mom?" he asked. I smiled. "It's over." He nodded, then grinned. "Can we get dinner? Just us?" "Yeah," I said, starting the car. "Just us." We ended up at a small diner on the edge of town. Nothing fancy, just warm light and the smell of fresh bread. As we ate, I realized how peaceful a meal could be when love didn't have conditions. Outside, rain began to fall, soft and quiet. For the first time in years, I didn't flinch at the sound.
for the first time, I left a family dinner without a single ounce of guilt. 1 year later, my house felt alive again. The dining table, once bare, once symbolic of waiting, now glowed beneath the soft shimmer of candlelight. Plates didn't match, the chairs creaked, and the tablecloth had a tiny coffee stain from Ethan's morning rush. But it was mine. Every inch of it, built with intention, not expectation. Margaret Snow sat at the head of the table, as regal as ever, swirling her tea with that knowing smile of hers. "You've done well, dear," she said, glancing around at the laughter spilling from the kitchen. Ethan was helping one of the volunteers from my new foundation, the Hartwell Foundation, arrange dessert. A simple lemon pie, no grand cakes, no speeches. Just people who showed up because they wanted to, not because they had to. "I still remember your first day at the bank," Margaret chuckled. "You couldn't even ask for a raise." "I didn't think I deserved one back then," I admitted. "And now?" I smiled, watching Ethan sneak a slice of pie before dinner. "Now I think I've earned something better. Peace." After dinner, we gathered in the backyard. The air was warm and kind, the kind of evening that made the world feel like it was forgiving you. String lights danced over the fence, and the sound of cicadas filled the pauses between stories. One of the girls from the foundation, Tasha, handed me a handmade card. She was 16, quiet, with the same hesitant confidence I'd once carried. Inside the card was a line written in careful handwriting. "Thank you for showing me that where you come from doesn't decide where you're going." I swallowed hard. "You remind me of me," I said softly. She smiled. "Then I'll be okay." Later that night, after everyone left, I stood alone in the kitchen, collecting the glasses. The laughter still echoed faintly in the air. For a moment, I thought of Rachel, where she might be now. I'd heard through legal channels that she'd moved away, trying to rebuild quietly. I didn't hate her anymore. Time has a strange way of sanding down even the sharpest memories. The words, "find another table," no longer stung. They had become a compass, a direction. Because in the end, that's exactly what I did. I found another table. I built it myself. Margaret had once told me that money isn't power, clarity is. She was right. The Hartwell Foundation wasn't about revenge. It was about rewriting a story that had started in silence and ended in purpose. Now, foster teens and adopted youth could walk into our little office downtown, learn how to handle savings, build credit, and invest in themselves. Every week, I told them the same saying: "You don't owe your past an apology for your success." Ethan came in, barefoot, hair a mess from the night breeze. "You're smiling again," he said sleepily. "I guess I am." He leaned against me. "Grandma said families are forever. You think that's true?" I looked at him, my heart, my only real truth. "Families change," I said, "but love, the real kind, it doesn't leave. It just finds a better table to sit at." He nodded, as if he understood more than his 10 years should allow. "Can I keep this one?" I laughed. "Yes, baby, this one's ours." Before turning out the lights, I walked back to the table. The candles had burned low, their wax dripping in soft golden rivers. I traced the wood grain with my fingertips and felt a deep stillness inside me. Not emptiness, but fulfillment. I whispered a small prayer, not of bitterness, but of gratitude, for Margaret, for Ethan, for the strength that only heartbreak could have taught me. "Family isn't who you eat with," I said aloud, smiling at the quiet room. "It's who wouldn't let you eat alone." And as I turned off the lights, the night settled like a soft blanket, peaceful, unhurried, complete. Sometimes, the only revenge worth serving is peace at your own table.